Emotions Matter. Brought to you by emaw.com. That's EMAWW.com. Your solution for emotional intelligence. Thank you for joining me, your host, Monique, on the Emotions Matter podcast. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce my guest, Dr. Amy Serin. Dr. Amy Serin is a neuropsychologist who, along with executive and child advocate Vicki Mayo, founded the Touchpoints solution in late 2015. Their mission is to bring relief to millions of people who suffer from stress and anxiety. Their wearable Touchpoint helps people cope with sensory stimuli. It's considered to be a game-changing neuroscientific discovery. And now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Amy Serin. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is going to be a great conversation. I'm very curious about Touchpoints. So tell us, what inspired you to become a neuropsychologist?
First of all, I love people, and the psychology aspects allow me to help so many people on a daily basis. But the neuroscience of how you explain people's behavior and how you improve the human condition with all of the science and technology that's out, that's what's incredibly exciting. We can do so much with neuroscience, and using applied neuroscience to actually help people improve their lives has always been a passion of mine.
Now, is the study very different for that field versus just psychology?
Neuropsychologists start out as psychologists, and in my case, it was clinical psychology. And then we get additional training in brain and behavior relationships, and we do 2 years of postdoctoral training in typically medical settings. So we kind of bridge the gap between the psychological world and the medical world.
Okay, that's very interesting, and that would definitely relate to product that you and Vicki Mayo created. So can you tell us how that original idea of Touchpoints actually began?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it was a blend of a lot of things happening. So most neuropsychologists don't actively practice therapy, but I'm one of those people that I love people so much and the healing aspect of what I do that I've got one foot in neuroscience and one foot in healing. And so in applying that over the last decade and realizing that successful components of treatment, for like post-traumatic stress disorder and other things, they always included something that was sensory or stimulated the peripheral nervous system. There were these components of it. And so that was kind of gelling in my mind. And at the same time, I'm a mom and I have 2 children with some special needs. And I needed help as a parent and needed some solutions for things like sensory issues and anxieties and sleep problems. And then I was also tasked with doing some global consulting and responding to things like the Ebola crisis and also foreign militaries and domestic militaries and trying to answer the question of how do we prevent PTSD from ever even happening? And my answer was, you have to regulate people's nervous systems. If you are calm, then things get encoded in your brain differently, your memories form differently, you're able to think and respond and have empathy and be better. But immediately when that calm system shuts off and your stressful system takes over, all of your non-essential brain functions shut down. Essentially what happens is you don't think as clearly. You don't act very well. That system is meant for you to just be a reactive ball of instinct, basically. And we sometimes call it our animal brains, actually. And we're always in between these two systems. And so through some sensory stimulation and some of these things that helped speed up the therapeutic process, I realized that we could actually take this and embed it in a more technologically sound device, give everyone access, and give access to people to huge amounts of stress relief in real time. And I realized this was not it was not fair to confine this to doctors' offices, that we needed open access. We needed everybody to be able to have this, whether it's kids or adults or anyone, because all of us perform more poorly, and our bodies are inflamed, and we're not doing our best when we're stressed out. That's just the bottom line.
So how does it actually work?
So Touchpoints work with alternating microvibrations, and one hypothesis of how they actually work in the brain is that there's a network that's always controlling your fight or flight system, and it's based on sensory information. In other words, if you see a snake, that visual sight gets translated into a fear response, and you go into something called fight or flight. So our sensory system, sight, sound, touch, that determines whether or not our brains automatically put us into the stressful system or the calm system. So this actually interferes non-invasively with that. And what's really cool about Touchpoints, besides that they're non-invasive and easy to use, is that you don't need to pay attention to them. These also represent a paradigm shift in how we look and treat the stress response. Most people have it wrong. Sorry, everybody, you have it wrong when you think about stress. You think, and I'm here with good news though, so don't lynch me yet, but this is really good news. You think that you have to stop what you're doing and exercise, do yoga, journal, think about something differently, change your perspective, breathe 10 times. You think you need to do that to control your stress response. But I'm here to tell you the stress response is autonomic. Auto meaning it self-generates. And your brain puts you into a stressful state without your awareness. The good news is you can take yourself out of a stressful state without your awareness by interfering with bilateral stimulation technology. It's called BLAST in Touchpoints. So you could be at your desk having an incredibly stressful conversation, 2 touches of a button, Touchpoints are on, and now your stress is actually being relieved for you while you're continuing to have the conversation. You can be giving a presentation, or professional golf players, for example, wear them the entire time that they're performing to keep your stress system down. You can be doing what you do during a normal day and actively be creating this kind of ceiling on your stress response, and that can increase focus, performance, feelings of well-being, and also help you make better decisions.
So it rechannels the energy that it's sensing? Is that what it's doing?
Energy is a kind of a whole different conversation, because people, think about, the chi energy and the life flow and things like that. Because I work from the neck up, I'm a brain person. I like to just talk about kind of what it does in the brain's networks. And it basically, that autonomic response that makes you stressed out, it just interferes with that non-invasively and without you having to do anything, so that it keeps your stress at bay. And if you are stressed out, it can actually lower your stress. So this has implications for sleep, for example. So we've all, I think, had the experience where we're laying in bed at night and our thoughts just will not stop. If you put Touchpoints on before you go to bed at night, then those stressful thoughts that you, by the way, can't do anything about in that moment anyway, right? Because you're in bed. So you can't do the 50 things on your to-do list in that moment. Your brain doesn't need to be, preoccupied with those. But a lot of times we can't stop those. What Touchpoints will do is it'll just interfere with the stress system. And so those thoughts just sort of naturally kind of go away, and then you can ease into sleep.
That is really very fascinating. I'm already thinking of a dozen people, probably including myself, who could probably benefit from some device like this. And so it's non-invasive, so no one really is aware about any kind of changes that it might be occurring on them, other than the fact that they're feeling less stressed?
Yeah, so non-invasive basically means we're not emitting a current into your body, an electrical current. We're not actually, poking you with anything. Non-invasive just basically means that we're not doing damage to any other system in order to get a positive effect from this. Okay. So what the user usually feels is actually a reduction in stress. So we have something called the Touchpoints challenge. And what that is you think about something stressful and you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. So how stressful does it feel right now? And then the Touchpoints, if you have the original versions, those pair with an app. And the app will actually turn them on automatically and then turn them off after 30 seconds and ask you the same question. The results from thousands of users are a 71% stress reduction in 30 seconds. So the users actually feel a significant decrease in their level of stress. And so that's the most notable sensation. What they feel when the touch points are on are just gentle micro vibrations back and forth. And it's kind of like white noise, where you will orient yourself and you'll start paying attention to that as soon as you turn them on. But then after a while, because they're rhythmic and they're soothing, you won't even notice that they're on.
And so you wear them on your wrists? Are they positioned in a certain area where you can receive those impulses a little bit better?
So you can wear them in multiple places on your body. And, they work so well. I can't establish statistical significance and show that one part of your body works better than another. So it's really user preference at this point. A lot of people like to hold them in their hands, but if you want hands-free, you can wear them on wristbands in your wrists. You can put them in pockets or socks. A lot of students, for test anxiety, love to wear them in their socks, because in a very, very quiet environment, you can hear a slight buzz. They're 20% quieter than an iPhone buzz, but you still can detect a slight sound. So in order for nobody to hear anything, they will put them in their socks and take their SATs or board exams or tests in college. That seems to be the favorite place. But if people are just wearing them as they go about their day, a lot of men like to wear them on their wrists, and children at school like to wear them on their wrists. And women, honestly, I think their favorite place is to put them in their tank top straps. Yeah.
Hopefully they're waterproof, because, I have a tendency to find things in my washer that sometimes there are electronic gadgets and my children forget that they put them in their pockets, or maybe now they're socks. So, is it pretty indestructible?
I mean, it's like the Dennis the Menace cartoon where he's testing all these things and, they're saying, oh, well, they're not indestructible. I can't really say they're indestructible. I can say that I did run over one once with my car and it still worked.
Oh.
But they're water resistant, not completely waterproof. So we don't want them immersed in water. But I have I do know somebody that put them through the washer once and they still worked, probably because they were in a pocket.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're water resistant right now, and we're working on some other versions, because pro athletes.
I was just thinking that, or not just that, sweaters, and I don't mean the kind that you put on. I mean people who sweat a lot, right?
Right. Says sweater is a noun versus a what verb?
Yeah, exactly.
Sweat doesn't seem to cause a problem
or an interference.
What's that?
It doesn't interfere with anything.
No, and they don't have to touch your skin.
Oh.
So again, because they're non-invasive, they're not emitting any kind of current, electrical current or anything. They don't have to touch your skin. You just have to be able to detect the micro vibrations, and they're working.
So do you have pretty significant research then?
Yes, we have years of clinical data. We have data on brain maps and brain scans from electroencephalograms that show what it's doing in the networks of the brain. We also have user data from over 1,000 of our first users. And we have studies going on around the world on semi-pro athletes and cortisol, sleep, pediatric sleep, children with autism, children with ADHD, individuals with OCD. There's lots happening right now that should be published here very shortly.
Hey, I'm just sitting here trying to think who could not benefit from something like this, because actually my next question is, who would it benefit the most? And maybe there really is a category that you feel, yes, if you suffer or have any of these particular issues, yes, this would really be the product you want to look into. But just on a daily basis, I mean, we're faced with stress all the time. So who do you think, though, of the people that you have worked with, that you saw the most profound significance, especially emotionally, or stress level using this product?
I like to look at it as a continuum of who are going to be the heavy users, the people that need it several hours a day, versus who could just benefit from spot using. Because you're right, everyone has stress, but not everybody has anxiety or autism or ADHD or sleep problems, So the answer is, everybody can benefit from this, because we all go through stressful periods in our lives or stressful times during the day. Our heavy users and our early adopters tend to be children with autism, individuals with ADHD and sleep problems, and people who are very performance oriented, like CEOs, public speakers, things like that, that really, they tend to be our heavier users and our early adopters. Moms, especially though, love these because they're kind of fun for the whole family. I tested like how many times am I using touch points? The average user uses them 4 times a day.
Hmm.
And I use them on myself and my children 17 times in 3 days in a variety of situations. My son had a stomach ache before the first day of school. So we put touch points on, stomach ache remitted. He went just fine. And then he didn't avoid school the next day. I had a difficult issue at work. And so I had them on while I was dealing with a difficult issue at work. My other son, we had this huge bug. We all went into fight or flight. It was like nothing we'd ever seen. And we were kind of all freaking out about it. So we passed them back and forth. And then everybody went to sleep that night. One of my sons heard a noise and was afraid of the dark, put touch points on him a few minutes before he went to bed, slept just fine. And so there's 17 times in 3 days. And this is where the paradigm shift is really, really, really important, is that your fear network, your anxiety network is designed to lock into things and then have them stay a problem for you. This is how phobias develop. This is how fears develop. And so my son, who let's say hears a noise and is afraid of the dark, if I put touch points on, that goes away. And that's huge because the next night it doesn't happen again. And I see these parents come in with bloodshot eyes and they're just not sleeping. Their kids have had fears of the dark for years. They really don't have to keep suffering with that. Because when the kids don't sleep, the parents don't sleep, Really, you can nip these things in the bud and create, as the brain is developing and living, you can actually create situations where these things are a problem for a few minutes and then they just don't get embedded as an ongoing problem. And that is the whole premise behind the prevention of PTSD. If you've got somebody who's a first responder, like a police officer, a firefighter, or a military individual, and they're actually calming their nervous system down in real time after events, they are not going to, in theory, develop PTSD, just like a child who starts out with a fear is not going to develop a phobia. And so it's really pretty profound, the developmental trajectory that can happen and how you can really impact and affect somebody's life for the better over time with using these.
So to use them, do I have to be able to predict an oncoming stressful situation, or does the stressful situation have to occur first before I use it? Do you understand what I mean? Or do I just hold on to it all day and it just kind of monitors?
Yeah. So both and is the answer to that question. If you think about, there are situations that are going to be stressful. Okay. So let's say you have a difficult relationship and you have to deal with something in it. You just put them on and then leave them on while you're handling the situation. Okay. Or sometimes we can't predict stress. Sometimes something happens. It's just stressful. The other night, my garage door broke and fell and slammed shut, and I went into fight or flight, and I put the touch points on because that returned my stress level back to baseline faster. And fewer moments that you had adrenaline rush and those stress chemicals cycling through your body, the less inflammatory that response is on your system and the healthier you're going to be. So sometimes we can't predict what's going to be stressful, but in the moments that it is, you can use those. Also, if you have children, and they're starting to get that, that look, or something freaks them out, put them on your kids and they'll be able to calm down. And then, you've just possibly avoided a 2-hour meltdown.
And their system can retain that sensation so they may not need it again. So in other words, it doesn't actually become a crutch then, the system, the touch point.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing where we're really collapsing, kind of like an accordion, we're really collapsing this therapeutic process in people. Our go-to therapy for people with fears used to be, or is also now still, exposure with response prevention. And what that means is if you've got, let's say somebody's afraid of airplane flying, you desensitize them to the stress response about it by exposing them to different aspects of them, have them visualize, do this. It's a really long therapeutic process. It definitely works, but the new hack is just put your touch points on and get on a plane, and you won't feel that stress. So then what happens is the next time you get on an airplane, your brain goes back into the last thing it did, which was, last time I was on an airplane, I didn't feel that physiological stress. Therefore, I'm not stressed out now. and it's much easier. So you can actually create this very, very quick exposure with response prevention with touch points in these situations that normally people would take months or years to get over or never get over. The thing we do when we're afraid of something is we avoid it. And how many people do you know won't drive on freeways, won't get on airplanes? We sort of narrow our lives down based on our fear system. And if we can open those things back up, it really can open up a lot of more better possibilities for how we can live our lives.
As an aside, I could actually see the drug companies, the pharmaceutical companies fighting you against this because only because we don't have to take some kind of chemical and drug that alters our whole entire state of being to just relieve ourselves from that anxiety so we can live our lives, the way we should. That's what I mean. It's just, that's like in the opposite direction of our sense of health or mental health. In fact, that brings me to my next question here is how emotions can impact our health? Because you've already mentioned earlier on in your answers how it reduces inflammation or so can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Emotions all have their place. Okay. And there's a reason for them. So, but we kind of separate them into, negative and positive emotions, right? So when we think about the negative emotions, like, guilt and anger and irritation, things like that, those are actually, they are inflammatory physically. There's no separation, by the way, between mind and body. So that's another paradigm shift. I mean, there's no separation. People ask me, is it mental or physical? It's both. Is it psychological or medical? It's both. Your brain is part of your body is part of your brain. It's all connected. So anytime you experience something quote unquote negative, it actually is setting off a cascade of things that are not good for your overall well-being. But a lot of the emotions that we don't want to feel or that create problems for us are actually based on sympathetic nervous system activation. That's our fight or flight system. So what we find, our touch points have a setting for anger. And the reason why they have a setting for anger is that you only feel angry when you're sympathetically activated. If you're in your calm nervous system, you cannot be calm and angry at the same time, just like you can't be in bright light and darkness at the same time. They are mutually exclusive. So when you are someone who has a lot of negative emotions that creates problems in your life, both internally for your health and externally in your relationships, the calmer you can become, the better off you are and the less inflammatory your body is. And, we have personality correlates to things like heart disease. Type A people have way more heart attacks than other people. They have way more difficulty with a lot of health issues because their bodies are constantly inflamed because of this kind of hyped up psychological state that they're in, this intensity that they feel. And if they put touch points on, they can calm down quite a bit. And over time, we have not tested this yet, but over time, as we build more longitudinal research, one thing that we could look into is, can we effectively can we have somebody with this kind of personality and mellow them out and then prevent these health outcomes that are so problematic?
That would really be a revolutionary thing. It's called touch points. Is it touch points because, where does the word touch come in?
Well, the touch comes from the tactile part of it. So the technology in touch points is called BLAST, bilateral alternating stimulation in the tactile form. Tactile means anything that touches your body. So that's where the touch comes from. And the points is plural because there's 2 points on your body that you need the touch points on in order for them to work. If you just have one, it's not effective. It has to be what we call bilateral, meaning one on one side of the body and one on the other. So they always come in a set. And if you buy them, they come in a kit with 2. And the reason we think is because the somatosensory cortex, that's the cortex that processes the touch sensation, it's contralaterally organized. In other words, it's split into 2 halves, and we need to interfere in both of those halves in a certain way in order for that the networks in the brain to pull back the stress response. That work is what I've been working on for the last decade, is figuring that out.
Would you say that touching can affect our emotions?
Absolutely. One of my old professors who I loved in my graduate program is Tiffany Field, and she's the head of the Touch Research Institutes in Miami. And she actually factor analyzed the health problems in cultures that had a lot of touch as part of their cultural practice and a lack of touch. And we're actually a culture that's doing pretty bad in the touch department, by the way. And she found a correlation. Touch is incredibly healing and soothing. And things like massages or loving touch, that can alter your neurochemistry and your physical well-being in a very, very powerful way. Touch is actually one of the most important salient senses in terms of our health and well-being, actually.
I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
I really completely agree with that. Just as an aside here, I volunteer at a humane society. I'm an official cat player. I actually go and I try to socialize cats that they get. But I do this for my own personal pleasure, because when I am sitting there, holding a kitten, for example, and they're falling asleep and they're purring and I'm just, stroking their ears or their paws, my whole sense of serotonin just goes, just explodes, and I'm just the most
Yeah.
calmest. And I'm not thinking of anything. I'm not thinking of what I have to do next. I am just so in the moment. And so while I might be helping the cats the long run, those are my touch points, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny. I have not tested touch points on cats. We have customers who've sent us videos of dogs and horses, and they work on dogs and horses. My friend had a dog who was afraid of the thunderstorm and shaking and pacing, and put touch points and the wristbands around her paws, and she just sat down and was completely fine, and then took them back up off again, and she was up and pacing. And the touching pets and other human beings, it's very, very important. There's even studies on nursing homes that show that bringing therapy dogs in or having, a resident pet is actually calms their blood pressure down. It increases their health outcomes and their sense of well-being. Touch and connectedness with animals and people are very, very powerful in how we can regulate ourselves, for sure.
Absolutely. I actually have a therapy dog, and I used to take him to the elementary schools for a reading program. And so certain students who did well that week, might get a chance to sit with Teddy and read to him. And they would, of course, pet him as they're reading. And or sometimes they would call me over to a classroom because a child just got some disturbing, upsetting news, and they knew I was on campus, and they say, "Can you come over here and, see Madeline?" And so there's Madeline, crying hysterically, and then she sees Teddy, and she just goes over and,
Mm-hmm.
hugs on him, and, her sobs start to calm down, and now she can kind of articulate what it is. But yeah, just that power of the touch. Yeah. Tell me, do you think there's a difference between moods and emotions?
Oh, that's a good one. Let me think about that.
Okay, you don't have a lot of time to think. I'm only joking.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I won't think. Oh my gosh. Now there's pressure. Now I'm feeling pressure.
Put those touch points on now.
Where are my touch points? I can't have them on. Moods and emotions. Maybe there's some nuance difference. I mean, I really think they're probably, it's like a Venn diagram with a large overlap. Moods might, if to some people, mean that there's more stability. If somebody's, moody, that just means they're having a lot of maybe ups and downs in their emotions or certain ones. I don't know if there's a real distinction between that. I think that, I'm always going into neural networks. When you ask me that question, I immediately start picturing neural networks and how they're working, and is this a different categorization in my head? And I don't really know. To me, they're very, very similar, if not the same.
Or maybe when I think of a mood personally, and you more, this more in a science level, I think of that as the subliminal state of the emotion. That the emotion is there, but it's kind of more submerged, and so we only see it as a mood. But I think if the right triggers were there, it could probably be a full-blown emotion, that could be revealed by itself. That's how I see it. They're
Yeah.
connected, but they're definitely connected. Definitely connected.
Definitely. So a mood could be in your mind, in the way you're thinking about it, is maybe more of an internal state, and emotion is the actual emoting of that
Right. So I might,
mood, the actual expression of it to somebody,
right.
to another observer.
Right. So I might have a child come home and they're kind of got, quote, an attitude. They're kind of snarky. I don't see that personally as a, quote, an emotion. I see that as an attitude or a mood. But if you press them a little further, well, you find out actually that they're angry, or maybe they're sad because somebody said something, or they didn't do well on a test, and they are not looking forward to talking to you about it, and so the attitude comes through, and then the real emotion can come through once you start talking to them. So yeah, that's probably how I see it.
Yeah.
We do have.
So you know what I would do if that were my kid?
What?
I would say, if I know they're avoiding, I would put touch points on them and be like, let me know if you want to talk about it. And they would actually be able to come to a different conclusion and be more rational about what happened and think more positively about it, because they're moving out of sympathetic activation.
Oh, that is great.
So it changes, using touch points might change how you conceptualize that a little bit, when you see how rapidly things can shift when the nervous system changes occur.
I think the touch points really helps with our sense of what we call emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And that it helps us to not allow the emotions, whatever they are, if they're preventing communication, that it helps get past that so that we can communicate those feelings. Doesn't suppress them, but it helps us communicate on an intellectual level how we're feeling. That's emotional intelligence.
That's such a great observation, because we know that the salience network that the touch points really are very heavily influenced is actually one of the networks of emotional connectedness and empathy. And think about it, it makes sense. When you are in fight or flight, when you're stressed out, as you work along that continuum, your brain is in there, you're less and less empathic, because you're more and more into your own internal thoughts and reactivity. So if you're in the right nervous system, the calm nervous system, that's when you have empathy. That's when you want to connect. And that's when, we're all wired for that. But being in a stressful state actually keeps us from that. And we've all had that experience. We're kind of moody, like you said, or having emotions, and our partner tries to engage with us and we just brush them off or say something nasty because we're irritated. If you have touch points on, you're actually less likely to do that.
Amy, it makes me wonder in a kind of profound way, if everybody were to have touch points, if there would have been a decrease in the current outbreak of violence that we see all around the world and in our country, whether it's a school shooting or a church shooting or a terrorist act. It makes you wonder if they had touch points, if they would have stopped and thought about rechanneling that violent energy and understanding the rationale or the irrationality behind that, if it could possibly prevent, people who are more likely to take that onto a violent nature. As you said, touch points helps build empathy. And I think that is what is very much lacking in a very technological society, is we miss that empathy. Yeah. Wow.
It's a great, you're kind of talking now about, kind of global consciousness and kind of the impact on things. And we're always talking about, how do you shift human consciousness? How do you make things better on a large scale? And in thinking about what creates huge amounts of problem, stress is responsible for, 80 to 90% of all physical disease. It's a huge component of, mental illness over time. And there's two principles that are very important. And these are paradigm shifts for someone or for some people, but two things. One is hurt people hurt people. Okay. If you have gone through a lifetime of pain and trauma, your nervous system is way overreactive. You're in fight or flight. You're a ball of reactionary stress. You're not able to control your thoughts. You're impulsive. That happens over time when we don't do something to interfere with that. And people who treat trauma know this like the back of their hand. Hurt people hurt people. If you have interventions that can take hurt people and heal them before they hurt other people, that changes the world. Okay. The other principle is that when you're in fight or flight, you cannot think rationally. So people who are normal, sane, healthy, if they are in an incredibly stressful situation and in fight or flight, they can make very irrational decisions. And that's the impulsive violence that we see sometimes creep out in otherwise normal people because they're pushed to the brink. And so we have to do something with our stress systems. We have to not be in fight or flight. We have to do things to be healthier, not only for ourselves, but on a global level to make everything better. And when I was consulting with a group responding to the Ebola crisis, for example, the question was, how do we take these villages that have just gone through what no human being should ever go through? And the answer is we've got to calm their nervous systems down so this doesn't get stuck, so this doesn't embed, so that these people's nervous systems don't keep developing in a way that means that this whole society is going to wreak havoc on itself. And I don't have 50 therapists to send out there, right? So how do you do it without access to medical care and therapists? And Touchpoints was the answer.
Wow.
I didn't have them then, by the way. I wish I would have. It was, I was developing them still. But that's what lights a very amazing, exciting fire under me every morning when I wake up, because I know too, having just gone through some, personal crises in my own life and having children with needs that really nobody else could help me with, and how to manage that and how to make sure that they're okay, having to just use that in my own personal life and knowing what this can do for our global community. That's what motivates me every day. And it is just so cool to see that, we've had these out for only 9 months and we've got 10,000 people around the world using them. And just these inspirational stories pouring in every single day about how they help transform people's lives is just been the biggest joy and blessing in my life.
Really, this is quite a remarkable product, and the possibilities of how it can impact our lives and our society are just limitless. As I sit here and I listen to you, all these other kinds of ideas start pouring in. In fact, we have a caller that has sent in a message, and so we'll get to him. His name is Ben, and he's from South Carolina. He struggles with OCD. He says he has a lot of unwanted thoughts that prevent him from making friends, keeps him away from, I guess, interacting with groups of people because he's afraid that he's going to do something, or that he has these thoughts that seem real to him. And so, like you said earlier, rather than face them, he avoids them, which is what you said a lot of our way of handling things is just to avoid it. So he wants to know if this device could help manage those, I don't know, he says OCD thoughts, but I don't know, would it actually manage the thoughts or more of the reaction to the thoughts?
So I'm going to go into a quick background just of OCD and what it is so that everybody can understand. OCD, and by the way, OCD runs in my family and I understand it very, very well. Touchpoints are not a treatment for OCD as a standalone, but they can help in conjunction with other treatments. So if someone comes into my clinics, I have Serin Center clinics in Arizona, and they have OCD, I don't just give them Touchpoints and send them on their way. We actually do things like neurofeedback and a therapy called EMDR, and Touchpoints as part of it. But how the Touchpoints can help is in OCD, the brain tricks itself into thinking that that creates a worry. Like, what if I just said something wrong and that person's mad at me, for example? Now I need to check in with that person and ask. And the OCD person feels compelled to, did I say something wrong? Did I offend you? They have to check or do something compulsive in order to get a short-term relief in their own anxiety. But the problem is then OCD comes right back and says, check again or do this again. And it's this very distracting loop that is the obsession, which is the worry thought, and then the compulsion, which is the need to feel like they have to do something with that. Okay. And this is why you get people with OCD checking the locks over and over, or washing their hands over and over. Doing these things compulsively means they're feeling compelled to do it, and they're doing it more than once. And it can take over someone's life to the point where they're doing compulsion 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And the treatment is what I mentioned earlier, exposure with response prevention, where we actually make them, feel the anxiety about this what if thought or this worry, and don't do the compulsion. But the problem with that is then they've got to wait for this terrible anxiety to decrease. And if you do that with touch points on, that is going to truncate. It's going to shorten the length of time for the anxiety to decrease, and the anxiety may not spike as high in the meantime. So now in my clinics, if I'm doing exposure with response prevention as a treatment, we do it with the touch points on. And before we even do that, we actually have them just think about it with touch points on, and it cuts down their anxiety by about 70, 80%. And now it even feels like they can go do it. It's really a hard thing, exposure therapy, because if somebody's a germaphobe, one of the treatments is have them touch toilets, right? And if someone's afraid that they're going to die from germs and you tell them to do that, think about that as your treatment plan. This is why, we get terrible compliance rates in this. Like, who's going to say, oh, sign me up, So you have to, as a therapist or as a treating doctor, know how to manage some of that anxiety before you can even get them to buy into some of the treatments. So what I would say for that is, to OCD, individuals with OCD actually use touch points for several hours a day, typically. Honestly, they're one of our heaviest users. And the reason why is there's so much anxiety that just kicks up and kicks up and kicks up with a lot of thoughts, that wearing them for several hours a day seems to actually kind of over time help manage that. But it's not going to treat OCD in its entirety. So, I wish you the best. It's Ben, correct?
Yeah.
I wish Ben the best. And I would say that in my experience, clinical treatment with neurofeedback and EMDR therapy and touch points, and then every once in a while in very severe cases also to add sometimes medication like an SSRI is necessary, but that's typically not what we do first. To treat it. But there is a lot of hope, and there's a lot of healing. And OCD is a persistent disease for sure, but it can be managed, and in a lot of cases it can be cured.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Yeah. And it also sounds like this product, along with the other things, can at least provide somebody with a moment of relief, which can be a lot. A moment to breathe can be tremendous for somebody who might suffer with something like that. Yeah, definitely.
Totally. And for people who are trying to overcome addictions as well, when you're stressed out, you're way more likely to go into addictive behavior. And then when you're calm, and you all know that. Everybody's got a little vice. I don't know if it's chocolate or wine or something else, but you don't come home from the most glorious day ever and drink a glass of wine and have it feel amazingly good, like it's okay. But for people who like wine, if they come home from a very stressful day, that feels much, much different. So one thing we're looking into is for people who binge eat or have addictions, they're less likely to go into the addictive behavior if they have touch points on. And if they do the addictive behavior anyway with touch points on, they don't get the same reward ratio. In other words, it doesn't feel as good, because they're not stressed out when they're actually ingesting the substance or drinking the wine or eating the chocolate. So it actually creates what we call an extinction curve over time, where if something's not rewarding anymore, you don't do it. So if somebody's addicted to gambling and they just play a slot machine over and over and they never get anything in return ever, and there's no blinking lights and there's no promise of a future reward, they won't stay addicted to that. Okay. It's this promise of a possibility of a reward and the memory of when it really felt really good to win something. Those can lock anything into a behavioral addiction. So if it's not being reinforced quite the same way internally in the brain, then people will have a much easier time not going into those behaviors. And that's the whole reason of these blocking drugs, where if somebody's struggling with alcoholism and they take a drug to where they don't get the same sensation from alcohol, then they're more likely to stop. They're very good aids to help. But if we can do this in a way that's not chemical or in a way that's non-invasive and very cost effective, I think we should do that. So,
boy, the future possibilities are just endless. Tell us, where can we learn more about you And what can we look forward to?
So I have a few secrets I cannot unveil today,
That's okay.
but they will be coming out soon. But there are a few I can. What you have to look forward to is we will develop a way for Touchpoints to actually auto start based on biofeedback and biometric data. That is very, very exciting. The next generations of Touchpoints are going to have a lot of app functionality as well. We'll have things like sleep timers. We'll have a therapist version because therapists use them in their therapy sessions, and they'll be able to customize certain things. We will have a subscription model with lots of content, and we'll have other cool things that our company will put out that is better, enhances your living through neuroscience. That's our tagline, is better living through neuroscience. So we're going to have a lot of those coming down the pike, and very quickly too. We're already working on a lot. Where you can find out more information is our website, which is ilovetouchpoints.com. And we've got all the research on there. We've got all the different, we've got originals and basics on there. And anything you want to know, case studies, people who have used them, how to use them, it's all on there. And I'm really, really excited. You're catching us in kind of the beginning of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really, really exciting time. And just so excited about how many people have benefited from this already and the potential for the future. And I just want to thank you for spending time with me today and having me on.
Oh, absolutely. And so once again, they would go to the website is ilovetouchpoints.com. Is that correct?
Yes, ilovetouchpoints.com.
Well, I know I'm going to be going to ilovetouchpoints.com myself because, boy, I'm telling you, the usage for this is really quite amazing. It's just mind-blowing where this can be applied to. And so again, I want to thank you, Amy, for joining us. And I want to thank you for joining me, your host, Monique, on the Emotions Matter podcast.